I'm Dr. Erica Bove, and welcome to the Love and Science podcast. I'm your host and also the founder of Love and Science, Thriving Through Infertility. I'm so excited you're here today. With over a decade of experience helping thousands of women just like you, I empower professional women to build their families with confidence and compassion. Let's dive in. Hello, my loves, and welcome back to the Love and Science podcast. I am so excited today to have a beautiful guest with me. Her name is Dr. Rebecca N. Thompson. There are many Dr. Rebecca Thompson, so I wanted to be very clear about that. She is going to talk with us today about motherhood and what it means, and her memoir, which is called Held Together, which is the most gorgeous book. If you have not yet read it, please pick it up. We just read it for our book club at Love and Science. And I wanted to introduce her because she is, you'll learn this throughout the conversation because she's absolutely amazing. But by way of formal introductions, Dr. Rebecca N. Thompson, MD, is a family medicine and public health physician from Portland, Oregon, who specializes in women's and children's health. Throughout her career, she has sought opportunities to use written and spoken words to help build community. So she's a community builder as well, and to make complex medical topics more accessible and more engaging for a wide range of audiences. And she's now the author of Held Together, a shared memoir of motherhood, medicine, and imperfect love. In this collaborative project, more than a decade in the making, Dr. Thompson weaves her personal story of life-threatening pregnancy complications into the stories of 21 of her patients, friends, and medical colleagues. Through profoundly honest and emotionally raw accounts, Held Together creates a space for connection, offering comfort to anyone touched by challenges in building or sustaining families. Obviously, that's all of us at Love and Science, and celebrating the resilience of women as they navigate the complexities of motherhood, family dynamics, and health and healing across generations. At its heart, Held Together aims to expand the understanding of motherhood's true diversity while advocating for empathy, inclusion, and improved support for all women and families. Woo! I got chills reading that bio. Mic drop. Dr. Rebecca, it's so nice to have you with us. Thank you for being on the podcast.
Well, thanks for having me, Erica, and thank you for including me in your book club recently. That was a lot of fun. I
Yeah, it
enjoyed
was a lot.
connecting with your community too.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Okay, so can you tell us a little bit about your journey for those of us, well, I read it, those of us who have not yet read your book, and also like then what inspired you to write the memoir?
Yeah, well, this whole project is rooted in my own complicated path to family. And back when I was finishing up what would turn out to be my first residency, that's a little bit of a teaser there. Um, that seemed like a pretty good time to think about trying to have a family, trying to get pregnant. And very quickly, my husband and I went through a series of three very complicated pregnancy losses, two of which were life-threatening to me.
Mm,
And even as, a senior resident, new physician, an educated medical person with all the privilege of knowledge and experience, it was incredibly isolating and even confusing. The knowledge didn't protect me at all.
mm,
So at first, I was really hesitant to talk about it, partly because it was just happening so fast. It was so
of
overwhelming
course.
that I couldn't get my feet under me to decide how and when to tell people about it. But also, in the culture of medicine, we're supposed to be strong and resilient and optimistic and, persevere through everything. And I wanted to be those things, but I didn't always feel that way in the midst of these
Mhm.
struggles. So I really hesitated to share. Plus, you don't really want to let on in your professional spaces that you might be doing something that could disrupt your professional career, like become
Of
pregnant and have
course.
children and those kinds of ordinary life things that we all should be so fortunate to be able to choose if we want them, right?
Yep.
But once I did start to open up a little bit about what we had been going through, tentatively, kind of hesitantly, um, I just found that everybody around me had a story and
Everyone.
they were
Yeah.
eager to share them. And maybe even more importantly, while many of these stories were about fertility challenges and those early days, they were also just about how family relationships changed over time, and they weren't only about forming families, they were about sustaining families, and they weren't only about biological families, they were about chosen and found families. So I wanted to find a way to preserve all of that and offer it back to others.
Mm, it's so beautiful. And
Thank
so beautiful. And so tell me about the decade that it took, because at one
you.
point in the memoir, you say, I want to get this right. You said stories are harder to tell in the present tense. And
Yes.
so tell me about your journey of assimilating your experiences,
Hmm.
meeting the people who you felt whose stories needed to be in your memoir, braiding it
Hmm.
together as you did, because it sort of really does weave in between your story and the stories of these other women.
Yeah.
I'd love to know about your process and how you
Yeah.
did that. Like it's almost like birthing a story, right? You think about it that way.
Yeah, thank you. I do believe that stories are always harder to tell in the present tense, and I couldn't have done this project when I was in the thick of things. So
Mm,
for everyone listening who is still really in it, don't worry if you don't feel like you can rally or make meaning out of this in any notable way right now. I started thinking about this. I've always loved to write, and I thought about wanting to write something that would help other families. But I started thinking about this when I had two children. They were very young. But I felt like I had a little bit of time at that point to step back and understand what had been happening. And part of what my path had ended up including was, as I alluded to, this second residency. So when I was going through all of the challenges, all of the losses, not knowing when and how and if we would become parents. We started to believe we would become parents one way or the other, but it was very difficult to imagine making
mm,
time or carving out finances, say, for assisted reproductive technology or adoption or surrogacy or anything we might have looked to as a resident. And because of everything that I had learned from my experience, both good and bad, both disappointing and encouraging, shall we say, um, I decided to go back and do a second residency in family medicine to focus more on women's and children's health. But when I did that, I wasn't a parent yet. I'd had three unsuccessful pregnancies and had no idea really what would happen next. So it was a huge leap of faith. As it turns out, I was, 20 minutes pregnant with my son at that time. I had him 9 months to the day after I accepted the residency position because the residency, as you'll read about, kind of came up by surprise while we had been planning and trying to have a baby. So I say the baby was planned, but the residency was a surprise.
so
So
funny.
I went into this program to get more training, not knowing how I would face it if I kept having all sorts of complications and yet was being tasked to take care of all these other women and families because that's what I'd signed up for.
Mm,
But along the way, and this gets at your question of sort of how it came together, I met so many incredible people. And they are part of what made me realize that these stories weren't just about early days. They were about how the decisions that we make when we're younger and the families that we build and find and choose influence our lives throughout decades and the interpersonal connections. And so as I saw their stories intersecting with mine, I thought that was even more fascinating. How do kind of doctor and patient relationships speak to each other, especially when, so of the 22 of us, half of us are medical professionals. So when a
hmm
healer needs to seek healing, so we've got physicians from, family medicine, peds, geriatrics, child psychiatry, pathology, and we've also got nurse, EMT, massage therapist, psychologist, like a wide range of healing professions. So I invited a number of them, former patients, medical colleagues, and just friends I'd known for decades to work with me and collaboratively try to tell each story individually in its own kind of self-contained little chapter, little essay, little personal exploration and narrative. And then my story is told in chunks throughout the book, but it pauses at intervals where someone else's story intersects with mine or our paths reflect on each other. So that's why it took such a long time was to really work with each of them, oral histories, journal entries, but mostly interviews and putting that all together, transcribing it, trying to capture her voice and then present it back to her in written form and say, how did I do? What did I get wrong? Could you expand on this? And go back and forth over
Mm,
countless iterations.
that's so beautiful. And this was not one of my planned questions, but it's coming up for me. It's the best that way.
Yeah.
Um, what happens when we tell our stories? Hello, my loves. I am so excited to share this news with you. If you are a female physician navigating the fertility journey and you want a structured, evidence based plan, I have created a free resource for you. It's called the Physician Fertility Roadmap. I have created a guide to help you optimize your chances of pregnancy and a successful outcome over the next 6 to 12 months. Check out the link in the show notes. Love you. Bye.
I think that we see ourselves as part of something bigger. I
Yeah,
think that's what allowed me to kind of put everything in context, especially again with a little bit of perspective, a little bit of a retrospective angle. That again, harder to tell in the present tense, right?
Mhm.
So I began to kind of understand and be able to put my struggles, both the past struggles and like knowing that I will continue to face, we all face things going forward, right?
Sure.
Put that in context and understanding that, life is long. If we're lucky, right? Life is long and we're all dealing with something. So when we put these stories into essentially a kind of a community and we create something beyond our own struggles, we can develop a greater sense of meaning. And, it makes me think of there's a point in the book where I'm really in the midst of all the complications, again, having no idea what will happen, but knowing that I have to take a break medically. I'm medically enforced to take a break because of having had the surgery and chemotherapy and a variety of things, and then having to wait after another complication where you can't get pregnant again right away. And I remember feeling like, well, I mean, this is awful. It feels awful, but like I have to go through it. So what can I do without sugarcoating anything to get something positive out of it?
Hmm.
And the line that I say in the book is, I was determined to channel sadness into strength.
Hmm.
So I really spent that time focusing on trying to be healthy and strong and, rest and eat well and get exercise and see what I could make of my career that would be satisfying and fulfilling no matter what the rest of my path would take, because, the time will pass and it's what you can do with it now that you might wish you had done looking back later. It's like a gift to your future self,
Hmm.
imagining what you'll wish you had done and how those small actions can add up, and individual stories can really become part of a larger tapestry that
Hmm.
can shelter and comfort others if we
Yeah.
can let it reach beyond us.
I think that makes so much sense. It's almost like I'm thinking of like the cross-linking of the bonds too, is like your
Yeah.
story is like one of the bonds, and then
Oh,
when
I
we
love
channel
that.
that sadness into strength collectively, then it's like we're just
Hmm.
this network of strength.
Network.
And when one
Hmm.
person is strong, maybe the other person can borrow from that
Hmm.
strength, and then vice versa. It's just like such a
Yeah,
beautiful thing.
that's community. And I love when you've talked about that on in other conversations I've heard with you and even in the book club about how when you can lend yourself to your strength to others when you feel like you have a surplus, but then you can borrow strength when you feel weak. And that's community.
Yeah, yeah, it totally is. So this meaning making, right? And I
Mm,
think that it can be really tricky in the present tense to understand the
hmm.
meaning of it all. And
Absolutely.
so
Often
for
impossible.
often impossible. And so, we're coming upon Mother's Day, and
Mm-hmm.
I think this is maybe the worst day of the year for my
Mm-hmm.
people. Perhaps the
Mm-hmm.
worst day of the year. There's other contenders, we all know what they are, usually the softer holidays that everybody blows up on social media.
Mm-hmm.
But as if you can imagine yourself, however many years ago, with these three terrible, complicated pregnancies, not knowing if it was going to work out for you and your husband,
Mm-hmm.
what what do you think would have helped you then to hear that can help people now who are truly suffering wherever they are
Mm.
on their path?
It's not hard to remember and put myself
Mhm.
back in that time, actually. There are many things that feel hazier. that I don't
Yeah.
necessarily, but that I remember really vividly because,
Mm.
I mean, I do write about this in the book. There was a Mother's Day when I was recovering from a surgery to have addressed some of these complications. And I say something to the effect of to distract ourselves from the unfortunate fact that it was Mother's Day, my husband and I went on a
Mm-hmm.
hike.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that is my answer is I say that like what I find comfort in is doing ordinary things sometimes. And whether that's spending time outdoors or snuggling your pet or calling a friend on the phone or exercising or reading or whatever it is that lets you get into kind of a flow state. I think that can be really a gift if you have something that you can let yourself get absorbed in that doesn't have to have any sort of performative or generative purpose. It's just
Mm-hmm.
because it's for you. Um, it's it's the not simplified version of self-care. There's too much
Mm-hmm.
kind of performative self-care these days.
Yes, yes, yes. That's
But
such a great way of saying it. Yeah.
yeah, so what can we do that really gives that genuine hope and not just forward looking, like I think hope is more forward looking, more future thinking, but being in the present and knowing that kind of like I was saying earlier, no matter what is going to come in the future, what can you do now that feeds your future self that you'll be grateful for later?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes so much sense. Yeah, I think that notion of authentic hope, I know like that resonated a lot when
So much.
we've talked about it. I think I think in the moment, one thing that's been helpful for me on various Mother's Days is
Hmm.
to keep my expectations very low. I don't know
Mm.
why there's such high expectations for that day. And like if we have a living mother and there's like all these cards and it's just like all these
Hmm.
expectations. And again, I'm so grateful. Like my own mother has had some health issues lately, and I'm so grateful that things are going okay.
Hmm.
She's doing better. I mean, I think just really asking the question, what would be meaningful for me today on this day? And to
Hmm.
say, like, it doesn't have to look a certain way, it doesn't have to feel a
Yeah.
certain way. But what would feed my soul today? And how can I like divorce myself from all those external expectations and just like
Yeah.
focus on me and my journey and what I need in this moment?
Yeah, and what
Um,
you're saying exactly is the same, like it shouldn't be performative. What you're describing
exactly.
that we want to like kind of push away is the performative part.
Right,
That's
right.
what I would like to reject. And also what you're saying just completely resonates with this idea of the gap between expectations and reality. And I think
Yes,
that's I
yes,
love that
yes,
expression, the suffering is in the gap, because I just
yes.
believe that so much. It's like if you keep your expectations low, actually in residency, one of my main mantras was the key to happiness is lower expectations. And it served me very well. Like not that you give up your ambition, but that you have realistic hope,
Mhm.
and that you kind of know what is within your power and what is not, and separate those expectations, not expecting magic, but looking for like realistic, empowering things and choosing the next right thing.
Exactly. Oof, that is so
Oh,
beautiful. It's so beautiful.
oh.
So I cannot wait to listen to this again because I think this is the wisdom I need to hear. And it's a process. Like it's kind of like the notion of surrender, how we surrender daily. It's not just like one moment in life when we surrender, but it's like every single day when we ask ourselves that question, like what is good for me? What is
Hmm.
good for my community? What do I have to give? How can I receive? We don't even ask
Hmm.
ourselves that question, what can I receive? And a
Mm.
lot of the time in this situation, it is about receiving. It is about not having to be strong all the time. But I think there's
Hmm.
this fear of like, I talked about this earlier this week with a coaching client. Like, if I let down my guard, it's all going to fall apart. Like, I have to kind of keep up this threshold of some
Mm.
sort of strength because if I even let a crack in, then it's all over.
Yeah, there's a hypervigilance, and our society really rewards it, especially in physicians and other healthcare professionals. It's,
Yeah.
yeah.
And what I think as I think about your book in the context of this conversation is like those those moments when you had those complications, especially
Hmm.
as you were going about your training, I think
Hmm.
as doctors we're taught that we're not human. We're taught that like we
Mm.
are like robots and machines and we have to be strong for other people and we don't give ourselves permission. And so I feel, at least my reflection on your words in your book is that those were very human moments and you were asking yourself the
Mm.
question, how can I integrate this humanity in the
Hmm.
context of this very like machine like robotic experience?
That's a really good point. I think that that's probably why that's what I find so rewarding in these stories because when we act as if we're not human, then we limit our chance to grow and change, right? And to me, the most inspiring, the most interesting parts of all these stories would be in watching people grow and change.
Yeah.
And, I like to say that this book, so many of these things are ideas and experiences that we don't talk about, that we keep hidden, and that, one of the meanings of the title, that we hold too tightly, right? We hold too close to ourselves. But when we can really show those moments, I think that the reason they're so powerful is that I like to say they're the extraordinary moments hidden within our ordinary lives. And we're all living these kinds of stories. We could walk up to 21 other people on the street and with their consent, write a book like this and tell their stories, and everybody has something.
Yep.
So when we recognize that common humanity, that fact that we're not just automatons, trying to follow an algorithm and do the prescribed thing, but where medicine's about relationships, especially primary care, reproductive care, psychiatry, a lot of these core specialties that touch on women's health, they are about stories of how we grow.
Yeah. And I think growth is by definition outside of our comfort zone too. And so,
True.
you know, it's
Yeah.
going to be painful, it's going to be uncomfortable parts of it, not every part. Some parts are
Right.
joyful too. But I think when we do it together, it normalizes that and we celebrate the wins. I mean, I always start my support
Yeah.
group. You saw this, but like,
Hmm.
okay, what's the win of the week? Because
Yeah.
we celebrate in community, and that brings that focus on what's actually working, and it also encourages that community so that when things are harder too, that there's that trust for sharing too. And I mean, I'll tell
Right.
you over the course, I mean, some people are with me at Love and Science for only 3 months and they get what they need and they move on, and that's beautiful. But some people are
Right.
with me and my patients too, I mean, for months and years. And I
Yeah.
see these transformations. I see people's nervous systems calm down. I see
Mm,
the openness to possibility. I think so much of the time when we get such bad news over and over and over again, we start to close off our spirits and we start to think like, well, maybe this actually isn't possible. We start making up stories, and we're always making stories, right? But what are the stories like? Well, maybe the universe just doesn't want me to be a mom. Maybe this it just isn't in the cards for me.
mm.
And I think we really need to like look at that and how can we, I think that's what you're talking about in the book, is how can we be held together? How can we lean on each other in
Hmm.
such a way that we can remain strong and open to possibility at the same time? Like we don't
Yeah,
have closed off.
what you're saying makes me think it's like this idea that we're trying to protect ourselves. But
Yes.
it's in some ways it's necessary sometimes. I mean, I think that's what I was doing initially and not talking about things because I just didn't know how to sort them out and I didn't know how to make meaning of anything right then. But I think it can also be misguided and like counterproductive because ultimately, we might feel that we're protecting ourselves by turning inward. That's that instinct to kind of hunker down, like, predator prey kind of instinct, right? To
Yeah.
make ourselves small. But what if protecting ourselves is really about putting out our most, vulnerable selves into the world so that we can find others like us and we
Hmm.
can become part of a bigger whole. And that's always going to be safer to be in community, to be in partnership and to find the others, right?
Yes. Yes. And there's all these lies that come, right, during this
Mm.
process. I think, and I want to call it out, one of the lies is I'm alone, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're thinking this, you're listening, and that resonates, like we
Mm-hmm.
all have that thought. And thankfully now, when I start to have that thought, I recognize it as a lie. And I'm like, no, Erica, you are not alone because of this, this,
Yeah.
this, this. You may feel alone, but you're really not alone. And how can you lean in just a little bit to the people in your life who know you, who don't judge you, who can remind you that you are held, you are free, you are
Yeah.
supported. And I think
Yeah.
that's also what the book is about, is like reminding I am not alone. We are in this together. We are stronger together. And yes, yes,
Yeah.
it's hard to share. Yes, it's hard to tell our stories. Yes, it's hard to read stories sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that it's just so important to remember that we are not alone.
But it's much more clear though when we broaden our definition. So the instinct again is to think like exactly what you described, but then if we open up our ideas to like be what does it mean to not be alone? Who are the others? It doesn't mean that, say, if we've had, fertility struggles and go through IVF, we only need those people in our lives to support us. Or if we've had miscarriages or a stillborn, we only need those people in our lives. That's not the case, right? When we understand the universality of some of these things, okay, this is why I think the stories in Held Together can be so powerful when put into a whole, because they feel like you read any one of them. At least this was my experience, or talk to these women, hearing their stories and then writing it up and reading them later. And you think, well, those exact things are never going to happen to me. It's incredibly specific what happens to this person. You couldn't imagine it because she's just a woman like any other, like you could be. But you also think, yeah, that's never going to happen. But yet you read it and you feel these universal themes. You feel like it resonates and it speaks to things in your lives and your life and feelings that you've had, even if the details that are different. So we
Right.
really are all the same, and that's a big part of. And by the way, anyone can go read the full introduction to Held Together on my website, which we can talk about later. But the very last bit of the introduction, and I specifically titled it an invitation, the introduction. It says, "We hope that you will find yourself among us and know that you are not alone." And that
Mm.
means quite literally find yourself, like here I find myself reading this book, kind of the way that we use that expression, but also on a more metaphorical level, like you'll find yourself among us. You'll recognize yourself in these stories, even though they're not the same experience as yours, but they have something to teach you and offer you and show you how very much we all have in common at the core.
Yeah, it is, and you're right. It's like both and because I've had so
Mm.
many people say, "Can you please give voice to XYZ topic about,
Mm-hmm.
doing IVF for genetic reasons or having
Mm-hmm.
considering a termination or like
Mm-hmm.
this is the other different." And I think that there's a huge void in the fertility literature right now. People always say, "What book should I be reading?" And there's one level of like, "What supplements do I take? How do I do like all the things right?"
Yeah.
And I'm the first one I have the science series on my podcast. I want
Right.
people to be empowered to know the science, and I think that satisfies like this rational part of like, okay, am I doing all the right things? Am I optimizing my chances? Because as type A female
Mm-hmm.
physicians or high achieving women, like
Yeah.
we have to function on that level because it gives us some sense of control. And that's just how we're wired. Like we're not gonna do that. But I think this is really the first book that I've read that
Mm-hmm.
addresses like the deeper needs, the deeper aspects of how hard this is, like the
Mm-hmm.
quest of becoming a mother and what that means for so many people, and how much people go through or what the sacrifice is, or
Mm-hmm.
maybe somebody like one of your stories where somebody had cancer and then lost
Mm-hmm.
fertility in some ways. And so like I think
Mm-hmm.
that like the deeper, like who are we, how does this challenge us at like the existential level, how do we continue to press on, where do we find the strength? That's what I think. Well, I mean, among so many other things, but that's the difference I see in this book, and what it adds. And I mean, I can't wait to read it again too. And I've
Thank
already
you.
read
I
it.
love that.
Yeah, and I mean, I've already listened to some parts again and again because it's just so powerful. But I think that like for every single person will find yourself in this book somewhere. You will feel
Mm-hmm.
seen, you will feel validated, you will feel not so alone, and you will have there are phrases and concepts and themes that will give you strength. And I had like as I was doing this, I was listening because that's how I do most things. And I had kind of like a notes app on my phone of just like the words that struck me and the themes
Mm.
and what it meant to me because it's so relatable. It's
Oh,
so
thank you.
relatable. And I'm so grateful that you are giving voice to people who are trying to find their way to parenthood. Maybe they found their way to parenthood and there's some new complication they didn't anticipate.
Mm-hmm.
It's very, very beautiful what you've done.
Thank you. And it's funny what you're saying really it echoes how I feel too, even though I'm gonna use air quotes here, I wrote this book. I feel like I was just shepherding these women's voices and helping them, bring out the most compelling versions of their stories. And so obviously during the process of, 10 plus years developing the stories, I went over them dozens and dozens of times individually and with each woman. But even since the book has come out and in the last rounds of edits, I, did maybe 5 or 6 last rounds of edits, reading through it the full. And once it came out, I read the whole thing as a book, like holding it in my hands. I've listened to the audiobook twice, and our narrator she's wonderful. It's been great to connect with her. Um, I never get tired of these stories either because even though, I certainly helped bring them into the world, they're not my stories. I'm just, carrying them with people, and I learn something new from them every time. And even though I know what's going to happen, like you can read me a line or two and I'll tell you exactly which story it's from and what's happening to her then, and I know them in and out in that way. Um, I still get teared up or feel
Mhm.
just really connected to this person in a different way each time I read or listen to the stories. They're they're just so universal and so powerful.
If you're listening right now and finding yourself nodding along, this is usually the moment people realize that they want support that's specific to them. In addition to this podcast, I offer one on one fertility consults where we look at your full picture with both strategy and compassion. You can learn more in the show notes. Now, let's get back to the conversation. Yeah, it's so true. It's so true.
It's such an
One,
honor to help people get these stories out into the world. Truly,
yeah,
I feel like I'm sort of the conduit.
right, that's right. And then also where they link and cross and
Yeah.
just give voice to so many people in so many different
Yeah.
situations
The
too.
intersections are really fascinating. I think that's a very unusual thing, and that's a big part of what motivated me to do this project. I don't think there's anything out there like that. I would like there
Mhm.
to be more, but it was really important to me to find the intersections in our lives. So, um, obviously, I know all of these women, and none of them are people that I went and solicited a story for a theme. I didn't say, "Oh, I really want a story about adoption or abortion or IVF or surrogacy."
Right.
These are just people that I happen to know, which is incredibly fortunate, and that so many of them would want to do it. It's And then I wanted to think about, like, as I mentioned, about half of them are healthcare professionals. But how do we care for each other in these times of challenge? And
Hmm.
especially when many of them also know each other. So there are a lot of Easter eggs in the book, and as just any reader, will notice some of them, but some of them you might have to read it a couple of times to notice the connections. You might see a phone call from my point of view and how it created a rift in this friendship that was a long friendship and couldn't kind of endure this challenging season that we were each going through in very different things.
Hmm.
And then you see the phone call from that friend's point of view because her chapter is next. But then later you learn, and I'll give a spoiler here, that friendship does come back around, and she's still one of my closest friends. And this is Tess in the book. And she and I do events for the book now together. And yeah, so it's really,
Yeah.
things can go in seasons, and there are a lot of moments where our lives intersect that I wanted to show again how we're not in it alone and how
Yeah.
our lives impact each other.
That's right. And I love that you share that experience because that is one of the things I coach on the most is actually the
Hmm.
pain of losing a friend or like
Hmm.
having this season of life distance people
Yes.
to beyond what feels like repair.
Yeah.
And, to know that these are seasons of life and things can come back around and,
Yeah.
like, it's just powerful.
And back to the thing about being in the present and telling stories in the present. I mean, that all has happened over the course of 27 years. So it's not to say that in this moment, when you are in a really challenging season of life and your friends are in a different challenging season or in an easier season,
Yep.
um, you may not be able to connect right then. And I think that's one of the things that this project has taught me the most, that we don't need to be in the same season of life to support each other. I think back when I was younger and didn't have as much experience, in my in my life over time, accumulative. Um, I I had trouble listening to stories that were of struggle that I wished I could be going through, like parenthood struggles. And, that friend, Tess in particular, had trouble understanding what it would be like to have recurrent pregnancy losses. And so now, when we support each other and other things that we've each gone through as people and as parents and in our own friendship, it's no problem to show up for each other. If one of us is having great things happen and one is really having challenges, we can hold, again, like
Hmm.
two competing things at once. Another meaning of the title, held together. We can hold at the same
Yeah.
time things that seem contradictory.
That's right. And sometimes, like in my own life still, like there are situations where I want to hear about something to a point, but there's certain level of details that are just too painful. And I think
Yeah.
true friendships, are able to sometimes, weather those things and say, this is where I'm at right now. I
Yeah.
wish I could hear this fully.
Yeah.
But this is what I need. And it's just not, there's no two friendships that are the same, but just understanding
Hmm.
again that performativeness, it doesn't have to look a certain
Yeah.
way. I think when we're authentic and show up with our truest selves, like the truth will set us free. It just really
Yeah.
will.
And it might take time. It's okay if it
Yeah,
takes time.
that's right. That's
Yeah.
right. Dr. Becca, I really wanted to touch on this idea of authentic hope because I think that
Hmm.
I am not a person who is like blind faith, pie in the sky, oh, just believe it's going to happen. But
Right.
I really do think for most of us who are science minded, who maybe believe in forces beyond ourselves, that there is a space for something which I call authentic hope, which is hope
Yeah.
grounded in science. Why does it make sense for me to stay on the path? Because
Yeah.
there's so much data, there's so much bad news. Sometimes anything good gets buried initially, and it can be really, really hard to stay on the path. So I wanted
Yeah.
to hear your reflections on authentic hope, what that
Yeah.
means for you, what you might offer for people who are really in the thick of it right now.
Yeah. I really appreciate that idea in your work too, and not always aiming for this false optimism or performative hope, back to the performative idea, but we're aiming to sort of neutral to positive. And I think
Mm,
for me, the origins of that would be in rejecting the idea that everything happens for a reason. Just nope.
hmm.
But we still have agency to choose to, we can say find meaning, but that feels a little bit passive to me, or that feels to me like we're implying that there is inherent meaning.
Hmm.
I'm not so sure.
Hmm.
So I would rather say that we can make meaning or create meaning out of things that
Yes.
happen. And I think that's about finding those kinds of purposeful paths that we were talking about earlier. What can we do with our time? There are things that we're expecting and they're not working out that way, and there's this gap. But what can we do with the parts that we have some control over, knowing, we don't, we're never going to have control over everything, and that's not the goal. But what things can we, maybe I'll say, take responsibility for in our lives that will be empowering, not to make us
Hmm.
feel less than or inadequate if we don't always, measure up to everything we'd hoped for, but like that we can really have agency in. And I think
100%.
that's my best goal for that, to try to keep that optimistic without being falsely optimistic.
That's right. Like what can we where is our power? So like we will do
Hmm.
Epic Friday sometimes at
I
Love
like
and
that.
Science
Where's our
or
power?
where's our power? And I say we're gonna air it, and then
Hmm.
the point is then we're gonna turn our attention back to how can we help so and so take back her power
Yeah,
today.
I like
And
that.
it's so powerful. And I think a lot of my clients are female physicians and they have call schedules and
Hmm.
spoiler alert, there's ways to create boundaries on those things. And there's ways to say, I mean, I would say if it was an appendicitis, you'd be out for 2 weeks. And so why don't we see this the same way? And so
Yeah,
one of the things is schedules and figuring out something that makes sense in the context of fertility treatment, which, as you know,
right.
is at least a part-time job. And
Yeah,
so,
right.
so we can make those requests. We can think about, and this doesn't work every second of every day, but we can think about our intentions. We can think about,
Yeah.
okay, I have this circumstance in my life that is infertility or recurrent pregnancy loss. I would never choose it. And, if I'm showing up irritable, if I'm showing up defeated, if I'm showing up powerless and scared and
Hmm.
afraid, those feelings are allowed to be there. But in our ideal world, they're not allowed to run the show. And
Yeah.
so, one thing
Yeah.
we talk about is how can we feel those feelings and let them go and say, my intention is to feel grounded. My intention is to feel connected. My intention is to feel calm. it's usually not this resoundingly positive emotion. That's not
Mm.
realistic. But
It's
to say,
neutral
like,
at least. Neutral at
yeah, my
least.
intention is to feel steady. Steady is a really good one
I
too, I
like that.
find. And
I
then
like
and then
that.
we can then look for what in our life would support that. Maybe it's the thoughts that we're thinking. Maybe it's the people we're surrounding ourselves with. Maybe it's how we choose to spend our time. What activity would feel grounding to me on this, Mother's Day Eve or Mother's
Mm.
Day? That's exactly like what you did. You took a hike. Like
Yeah.
those are the empowering questions. It's like a meta-analysis, right? Garbage in, garbage
Hmm.
out. We have to we have to ask ourselves these higher level questions of like what's actually going to make me feel better today. And I think
Yeah.
that's part of how we take back our agency is how do we want to feel in the context of this journey? And then what
Hmm.
choices can we make that are going to create that state at least the majority of the time?
This really comes back to how we tell our stories, right? We're telling our story to ourselves. We're living out our story, and um, it makes me think about this whole idea of. I like to say this book is fiercely optimistic, right? So all the stories that we talk about, all the women who are in this book, they're going through challenges. They're none of these paths are easy or necessarily what we would have chosen. But this is not a sad book.
Mhm.
It's not.
No,
It's really hopeful. Um, and I think that's because not only, are we rejecting false optimism, but we're finding a path through that is cohesive for each of us as we tell our narrative to each other and sort it and try to, make the meaning from it. But we're creating something bigger.
yeah,
And anybody can do that with their own story, with the way they think about it, with the way they talk with their friends and family, or just to themselves and how they make sense of their own experiences.
that's right. And I think it also needs to start with an eval like a shining light on, okay, what is my default? What is my brain offering to me?
Mm.
And many people feel I'm a failure. It's my fault. I waited too long. Like the laundry list
Mm.
goes on of like all the thoughts. And I think sometimes just
Mm.
noticing that without judgment and saying, okay, well, like what thought would not induce such shame, right? Because our
Mhm.
brains they can work for us if we feed them, if we encourage them, if we do this
Mhm.
in community, right? And sometimes it's truly as simple as like I'm doing my best, or I've got my A team, or I have a really thoughtful plan moving forward, something like
Yeah.
that reminds ourselves that like it's just not this very passive experience, but we really are doing. And that's part of the yes, of course, maybe in 5, 10, 20 years, we might be able to reflect back and
Mhm.
create something as beautiful as you've done. But even in the day to day, even in the face of this uncertainty, which I love talking about, how do we handle uncertainty when we are threatened by not being a
Mhm.
parent, threatened by not growing our family? How can we have courage in those moments? And I really do
Mhm.
think it's the words we choose, it's the people we surround ourselves with, and how we decide to keep walking forward.
Yeah, and just the fact that any of us are still walking forward. I know you like to say, and I've said this too, the journey is not for the faint of heart.
No,
I
it's
think
not.
just that the fact that everyone listening is doing that and whatever that next step is, they're taking it, they're making the decisions, like you already are strong, right? You have to just decide how you're going to channel that, what makes the most sense in the moment. But don't forget everything you've been through and endured already. You already are strong. Just keep
That's right.
going.
That's right. And I will often say, like, do you remember that time? Like, what, 1% of people get into medical school, right? So it's like, remember that
Right.
time when you were, I call it being a young hopeful. Do you remember when you were a
Yes.
young hopeful and you didn't know and you were studying and afraid and started to have panic attacks
Yeah.
about the MCAT or whatever it is?
Hmm.
My sister took the LSAT. I know there's like
Hmm.
other fields that are stressful, but I think you have navigated uncertainty before. You have.
Constantly.
And so drawing upon that former self and saying, I know this feels, it's a different flavor of it, but like I have what I need
Yeah.
to handle this. It's not easy, but staying in the
Yeah.
moment, staying grounded, remembering that anybody in the situation feels that way. And how
Yeah.
can we make the most of it, really? And as we transform in these ways, I mean, the goal of this whole process is to become a parent one way or another. And so to say, okay, once a parent, I'm going to have this whole new toolkit that I can
Hmm.
then,
Oh
I'm
yeah.
sure, I'm sure you've integrated a lot of what you've learned in your parenting, just
Yeah.
knowing how hard it was for you.
Yeah. And just thinking about like the more the more you're struggling now, the more, like you said, you can integrate that later as wisdom, and it doesn't feel good. Like maybe again, not wished for, but you've got it. Like, what can you do with it? And also this idea of this kind of like abundance model. Like the more that that generates, the more that that creates that kind of empowerment and having endured challenges and survived them, the more that we can then share it back to our communities, to our families, to our children, to our partners, to our,
Hmm.
whatever community we find ourselves in, like
Yep.
the more it grows for everybody. And that's really the mission of this project is, yeah, sure, it's our stories in this one contained unit, right? But it's hopefully will inspire everyone to see their challenges in a new light. And even if they don't feel hopeful or optimistic about them at the time, they can find some kind of power and purpose within them and share them with others and encourage others to talk more about their own stories too, to bring that
It's,
to each other.
that's right. That's right. That makes so much sense.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Is there anything else you want to say about Held Together in this space? Because everyone
Mm.
listening needs to get this
Mm.
book, needs to read it. I don't think it's something, at least for me, like, not reading it in one sitting is something that you read a story, you digest it, you think about it. If I ever had to, like, stop in the middle of a story, I'd be like, but what happened? Like these, like the way that you write it is so gripping. Like you
Oh,
really,
thank you.
I'm like, wait, she's waiting for her results. Like what's it gonna be? Like I
One of
just
the biggest compliments I've received from a bunch of people is that it reads like a novel. And so
it
it's
does.
all
It really
100%
does.
true. We've changed some details for privacy, so I said it's not all going to be accurate. About half the people chose a pseudonym and changed a little geography or something, but
Oh, that's good to
it's
know.
all true. Um, I mean, there are so many things. I feel like we could talk for hours about all of these ideas. We have so much overlap, but I think it really is about embracing that unexpected and navigating, like, we have to make the choices from the options available to us at any given time. And often
Hmm.
those are not the choices we wanted or envisioned having. And we're
Right.
moving from like expectations into experience, into the real world. And I don't know, just finding ways to reframe this messiness and take something out of it going forward. I think that's the best any of us can do in any
I
moment.
think so. I think so. And I want to read something that you say in the book. You say,
Yeah.
we aren't unique in our struggles. Others have prevailed over hardships before us, and we too can find joy in the most trying of times.
Mm.
When I think about the book,
Yeah.
that's like, like we aren't unique in our struggles. We're not alone.
Hmm.
Other people have done hard things, and we too can find joy. And
Hmm.
it's and sometimes I think it's a lot easier to find joy together, actually.
Yeah, definitely.
Beautiful. So, Dr. Rebecca, where can people find you?
Well, everything's on my website. So it's just RebeccaNThompson.com. We've got, as I mentioned, the introduction, there are reviews, endorsements, all of that. Lots of podcasts. I love these conversations. And also, I have a lot of resources there. Number one, I like to try to support other organizations. So the profits from like honoraria, speaking that I've done, things like that, book sales at community events, I've been sending to Resolve and Planned Parenthood, the Children's Literacy Foundation, and the Trevor Project. And there's a link
Mm,
on the website where you can order the book through an affiliate link benefiting Postpartum Support International, which benefits maternal and family mental health. So if you're interested in getting the book, thank you so much. And if you want to use that link, it'll also benefit PSI. And then the other, so that's kind of a resource to help organizations that have helped all of us through some of these things. Then the
mm,
other angle of that is I've developed, along with these collaborators from the book, tons of questions for book clubs, medical teaching settings, organized into kind of themed groups, and they're all under a resources tab on my website. So, as you know, Erica, I love to join book clubs virtually or locally. And thank you for connecting me to New England with you. I grew up
mm.
in New England, Massachusetts and Rhode
Yay.
Island, so it was really nice to have a little virtual visit with you all there. Um, but I also love speaking with trainees. I hope that these stories will really help shape the next generation of healers. And just got back from doing some events in the Bay Area with OB and psych trainees and young faculty. And I would love to do more with that, with peds, NICU, social work, like any range of doulas, midwives, like all the professions that relate to this. So please be in touch if anybody would like to work on some, especially virtual events anywhere in the country with their
Hmm.
trainees and other healthcare professionals.
Yeah, now I'm thinking about maybe, where I am faculty, maybe we could do like a book club for the residents and the
Yeah,
fellows with this
that'd
book.
be
That would be
great.
so fun.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
basically one of the things we did down in the Bay Area. It was incredible. It was so rewarding and especially because these people are so busy as residents, and the fact that they gave us their morning and I went there with Devora, my OB in the book. We traveled down together from Portland, and meeting with these residents was just to see their enthusiasm for understanding their patient's context better and wanting to read this. It was very inspiring.
Yeah, I think you bring out the humanity in all of us in this book,
Oh,
and
thank you.
I felt more human after, and
Oh,
also inspired by Devora and wanting to be an even better doctor. It's all
yeah,
in there. So thank you so
she
much for giving
is.
voice to all of that.
Oh, thank you for helping me amplify it because I just want these stories in as many hands as possible. And
Yeah.
I wrote the book to be evergreen. There's like no pop culture references. There's historical events, so we see how that those impact people in their ordinary lives. But um, I just want this book to reach everybody as much as we can over time, and I will not stop talking about it till other people are bored of talking about it. I'm good to go
Amazing, which
on.
isn't going to happen. All right. So again, a big plug. If you don't yet have this book, please get it. It is amazing. It will change your life. And
Well,
you know
thank you.
me, if I don't give compliments willy-nilly, if I have nothing good to say, I go silent or I speak my mind. This endorsement is like 1,000% authentic
Oh,
because
thank
this is,
you.
and I was a great books major. Like this is a really,
Mm,
really good book and an important book, and go get it and read it. Okay, my
thank you so
loves.
much.
Yeah, I am holding you with so much love over this Mother's Day. Let's keep it real. Let's keep the expectations low. Do something that feeds your soul. And the most important thing is to know that you're not alone. You know how much I love you. Until the next time. Bye.